Welcome to the AERO People podcast with our guest today, Dr. Katrina Abela
Hello.
from Vaia Legal in Malta, Valletta.
Yes.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Katrina, first question, because you are specialized in aviation and maritime,
Exactly.
let's see how far your knowledge about aviation goes. How does an aircraft fly?
I'm an aviation lawyer. So actually, I don't really know exactly how from the physics side of it, but I've started actually reading up on it because you get curious about these things. And I do travel quite often myself. I don't know if it's a good idea knowing the mechanics behind it or if it's better to just not know certain things sometimes.
It's not just magic. Yes?
Exactly, I can imagine so.
So how does it fly? Any short description you could give someone?
No, I've just started the research,
Okay.
so not advanced at all.
Okay, good. But in 6 months.
In 6 months, of course, we'll know in 6 months.
Lo-
We'll know in
lawyer-
6 weeks.
Lawyers are used to read a lot of books. When you study, I know it from my wife. It's a crazy amount of just legislation and rules and laws you need to learn. How could someone go through that and still stay sane?
It becomes, first and foremost, I always liked reading since when I was a child. If you come, as in, I'm usually reading about 2 or 3 books at the same time. Before I migrated to a Kindle, I used to have books scattered everywhere across the house. Now, well, a Kindle makes it a little bit easier with traveling and all of this, but I also have a mountain of books at home. So if you come to my home office, it's full of books. But obviously, there's a difference between reading for pleasure, for fun, and reading for work. But then if you're used to doing that, it sort of gets into your routine still. Our job as lawyers, we obviously still have to do a lot of reading on a weekly basis, I would say. Things are developing, things are changing. And I guess it also keeps you up to date with a lot of other things and also what's happening in different countries. So, for example, the aviation industry, you can't look at it as being the Maltese insular industry. You have to look at it as, let's say, at least a European framework of that. So yes, there's a lot of reading involved. Even if you go to my office, you'll see the books. So
Okay. No, you're right. The good thing in our industry is it's so international when it comes to aviation regulations and law, because we are basically body YASA in Cologne and the FAA. Then you have the two big streams, let's say so, but that basically ends, as far as I understand, as soon as you buy an aircraft, because that's not falling under international regulations, right?
well, it depends. Let's say in the European Union, when you're buying an aircraft, you have to also respect the European legislation with regards to taxation. So there are a number of directives and regulations, especially with regards to taxation, that the European Union has agreed on and imposed on all the member states. So that makes it gives us a certain amount of uniformity. However, every country still interprets or implements, interprets, not implements, in their own way. So there may be small variations, but they'll be all stemming from the same set of legislation.
Yeah. So it's like also like with the national regulators, everyone has
Exactly,
it's
exactly.
same but different.
Exactly. So there's EASA and then there's the individual civil aviation directorates that are implementing the EASA regulations. Sort of the same thing, but
Okay.
but let's say with taxation instead.
So when one is in the fortunate situation that they actually could afford an aircraft, what they have to take care about from a legal perspective? Just
I think there are quite a
30,000.
few considerations they have to, someone that is purchasing an aircraft needs to look into. Usually you would say, I don't know, let's say you're off to buy a car and it's the one you like, the one you visually like. However, with aviation, there are many other considerations that need to be thought about and properly considered before an aircraft is identified. Yourself, you mentioned the FAA and the EASA body. I think that is one of the first considerations a purchaser needs to make. whether this aircraft is going to be based mainly in an EASA jurisdiction or in an FAA jurisdiction. Because as we know, an aircraft that is built for FAA regulations is not compliant with the EASA regulations, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of money to get that aircraft compliant. I think moving forward from that, then they would need to identify the capacity of which they would use the aircraft. Is the aircraft going to be used only for their private activities, or is the aircraft to be put under an operator's AOC to be operated in a commercial manner and made available to third parties for charter? Because that will change the rest of the decisions that will be made. So let's take then the example of we're choosing an operator for the simple reason that Malta is an operator's jurisdiction. So the legislation in Malta is more geared towards operators. Once you've decided that, let's say, okay, I will be putting my aircraft on an AOC, it's going to be commercially compliant, and we're going to get in some revenue from third-party charters. Then you obviously need to start the process of selecting an operator, which is quite a big job to do because there are a lot of operators around. Some are more suited to a certain type of client, some are more suited to a certain type of clients. The operator would then usually guide you as to the jurisdiction of where your aircraft should be registered. Let's take Europe, for example. The regulations, the laws and regulations in Europe are very, very similar. But once again, every country has their own way of doing things. And not every country is, let's say, open for business as that much for aviation. So the Maltese jurisdiction is literally, as you would say, open for business for aviation.
There is a rationale behind.
There's a rationale, there's a plan, it's been literally put on the government priority list, which puts us in a very lucky position whereby the industry is kept alive. We're constantly amending and reviewing laws and regulations that need to be updated. And we do have government support, meaning the civil aviation is there to support us with moving forward, with bringing in new business, which obviously makes a very big difference. There are other countries in Europe that aviation is not not their market or their industry.
Take, for example, Amsterdam, where business jets are soon to be banned, as far as I remember.
I'm not sure. I think it was more France that the discussion was being had.
Yeah. Or, yes, but I totally agree. Malta put itself in a very fortunate or in a wise spot.
It is, so. Yes. I think a very good job was done with the aviation framework, which is, as I said, it's constantly being developed and updated, which allows us to remain with let's say the top 3 jurisdictions in Europe.
Yeah, well, you see how much operators are moving to Malta or have moved. I think I've heard recently, was it 800 or 850 aircraft currently, or it's
I think it's close. I think it's close to there, but I'm not sure of the exact number. No.
With the airlines coming now?
The big airlines, exactly. So they are obviously bringing in a huge number of aircraft, but it's not just the operators. Ancillary services are raising themselves here. So it's an industry that is growing and developing, literally.
So you benefit from it.
Service providers do, yes.
When you compare aviation to maritime law, because I have to be honest, I have no idea about maritime law, so I'm curious. What are the differences? Is it a total different set of?
It's not a total different set because they are both based on common law, which is UK law. But they are very different, yes. They are very different. Certain basic principles are similar. So, for example, the way you finance a vessel would be very similar to the way you finance an aircraft, but the basic principle is the same, not the way you actually execute it or the way you actually secure your financing or your assets. So let's say the basic principles are very, very similar, but then obviously there's a very big difference as to the nature of the asset we're speaking about as well.
Yeah, of course. Planes tend to
move much faster than vessels.
True. You are actually, or when I think about a typical lawyer, then To be honest, I would not have your picture in mind, especially being a doctor. So I would consider that you are very driven because you
I'd say
are
so.
now slightly above 30 and you have your own law firm, you have your doctorate. You're obviously successful. Um, how?
I think the secret is loving what you do. Is waking up in the morning and being excited to go to work. So I think that makes a very big difference. And I was fortunate enough to have developed my career in an industry that I genuinely like.
Yes, it's always good to do what you love, and then when you like to read, yes, it's a big advantage. Huh?
Yes, I guess so. It helps.
What are you doing in your spare time? Oh, when you have
When we
there's
have, let's
still
see.
something less
Because
left.
it's Friday, 5:30, and we're still at the office. No, I have a meeting after. As I said, I genuinely like to read. That is one of the things. I like to travel a lot. So I do try when we manage, my husband and I manage to get a few days, we tend to travel. I love the sea. Love the sea, any water-based activities, even just being close to the sea, which I'm fortunate enough in this island I can be.
There's sea everywhere. Yes.
So I would say those would be the top ones.
Did you start, or what was first, aviation or maritime?
Maritime was first, mainly
thought so.
because the island has been a long-standing maritime jurisdiction. If you had to go around the law firms in Malta, I would say 60-70% of them do maritime work. It is a very strong industry which has been existing since a very, very long time ago.
You see Valletta very often
Exactly,
on the back
exactly.
of a ship.
The aviation industry is very new in Malta. So by the time that when I was doing my first internship, it was mainly a maritime industry I was in. Then it just developed into aviation as well. So it did start out as maritime, yes.
I think that's a natural progression because nautics and aeronautics, as the words say,
Yes.
are somehow related.
It was also the time where the government had when I was doing my internship as a student, the last year or two of university, the government had issued the new set of the revised Aircraft Registration Act. So I would say part of it was the right place at the right time. It was the right time, maybe the year I happened to graduate or all of that. And it's what you make out of it as well, I guess.
What would you think is more part of the success, Maltese success, to be a very customer minded, even when it comes to the regulators, or a smarter tax code, let's say so?
I think it needs to be a blend of first, obviously, being in tune with your client's needs. Clients are very different. We are usually dealing business to business in this industry. So it's very important to be sensitive to what that particular client needs. And I think the second component is quite simple. It's just producing very good work. That's what you need to do. Work hard, produce good work, and I believe that leads to success.
That produces gravity and brings in more customers. Yes, I agree. By the way, customers, what would be your ideal client? What's the profile or the persona of your ideal client that comes to you?
Well, a client that comes with a ready KYC file, where they have everything already done, everything certified, everything good, and we can onboard very, very quickly. No, but usually it's a client, not necessarily a client that knows exactly what they want, but a client that has organized thoughts, that we have a direction towards where we need to get to.
Where you have very little level of education.
No, not necessarily. That is actually, we always have to go through, especially if a client is new to Malta, we always have to go through that education process. It's more of the client, knowing the client's goals, where they want to get to. At the beginning of that, the brief before we're taking it on, that the client has a very clear idea of what they need to achieve, and a level of flexibility to accommodate the jurisdiction that we are in. Because we do come across, one of the hardest things we come across is when we have a client, and we have many of those, We have clients coming from other jurisdictions, or they would have already had
Certain
offices of-
experiences. Yeah.
Exactly, and Malta has its own, and obviously we have to somehow adapt to the Maltese way then.
When someone, I guess you're still taking clients.
Yes.
Or I hope so. So if someone would like to find you because they have an aircraft or they want to buy one or has a ship, the bigger the better, as they say, how can they find you?
I think the easiest one through our website, which is vialegal.com. There's the contact section, and I can assure you it's monitored regularly. So
Katrina, thanks for being our guest.
thank you for having me.
You're always welcome. So when you ever make it to Austria, you're mostly welcome. Thanks for watching, and I hope you had as much fun as I had and have learned about the legal aspects of aviation. See you in the next episode.